Our next guest is Belal Hafeez, a fitness coach, consultant, and influencer. He's helped many people achieve their fitness goals and improve their health. Today, we'll be talking about getting fit, losing weight, eating right, and building muscle. Let's get into it. Kind of getting started, what got you into health and fitness and that kind of whole industry?
So with me was it was interesting enough that when I was earlier on, my goal was to go into policing. And I was in college for it, and that was the jobs I was having, everything was gearing me towards that. But health and fitness was always something that I was always into, right? Obviously, going into policing, you have to be able to work out and do all that stuff. So I always had that passion for it. But even in leading into high school and so forth, I was into athletics and wanting to work out and learn and so forth. So I started realizing how much information I started putting together and how much I started to know than say the average person. And I would have friends and family that would ask advice and seeing results and so forth. From there, when I went to university, I actually I took psychology. Again, psychology was to combine it with policing and later on, hey, detective work or any of that stuff, right? So I'm like, hey, this would be a good degree to have before going into it. So that was my mindset, and then I realized most of my courses were kinesiology courses that I was taking, and most of the stuff all my electives and everything was started falling under that. And then from there, when I started taking courses and learning everything from there, then I started taking courses and stuff outside of university, where some of the best stuff is when it comes to practical and hands-on stuff. And I started taking a lot of those courses, and I realized this is something that I really want to start going down. Not something that the family was happy about, or parents were happy about, but I'm like, hey, if this is something I want to do, let's go full.
It's not usual. It's not the traditional.
No, it's heck, I have no idea what they were telling people that I was doing. Because how do you explain I'm a personal trainer back home?
Yeah, that's true.
So and then from there, I got a job at a big box gym, a big commercial gym, and then my goal going there was, hey, I want to start my own gym, right? And then from there was. I didn't have an idea of what type of gym I wanted to open, but when I first started working at the commercial gym, my goal was, all right, let me just go learn everything. Mm-hmm. All right, so I would learn from the people who clean the towels, from sales to HR to all the trainers there, everything. I just went in like a sponge, and I'm gonna take it all in. As I started going into it and I started speaking to more people, I started seeing the huge gap that's in the Muslim community, and seeing how none of this exists in the Muslim community at that time. Right now, you're starting to see a few more, but even then, it's not a lot. Yeah. Especially when it comes to actually being knowledgeable, as opposed to just being in shape, right? Because those are two very different things. Being in shape and being able to help. It's like playing a sport and being able to teach that sport. Yeah. Right. Like Michael Jordan, his record on the court and then in head office are two very different things.
Of course.
Right. Yeah. They're literally the polar opposites. Right. And that's the one thing, is that you can be good at helping yourself, but being able to teach others and understanding what's going to work for someone else is very different. So from there, I'm like, okay, maybe that's something I want to do. Let's continue to keep growing. The one thing I was blessed with was my client list I started to get happened to be Muslim at the time, mm-hmm. and getting some advice from them that were, very well off on their own, and kind of the mentorship and so forth. I started realizing that this is something I really want to do kind of on my own. And then from there, it was interesting. My first daughter, who's 9 now, she was born. And literally that week that she was born, I quit my job. Again, everyone thought it was nuts. Like, you just had a kid, you have a stable job with a really good income. Mind you, I was one of the top sales, because at that time for training, you had to be able to sell as well. And I think I probably still hold a record for the first week for the most sales made by a rookie. And so for me, like right off I was sprinting right off the gate. And then from there, everybody thought I was insane. And I'm like, no, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I want to do. And, Allahu Alam, everything, whatever happens, but this is what I want to do. And then from there, I started with a small list of clients, and from there continued to keep growing. It was interesting, actually. My very first client that I signed was in the first week. And it was actually in the first maybe 3-4 days. And usually takes about 2-3 weeks for you to sign up your first. Right. Usually it's either handed to you after you've done a few consults and gone through stuff and right. But for me, because the gym I was at was close to Islam Masjid, and so I was going there for Jummah, and I had my personal training jacket on. So I get to the masjid, and I'm like, on the way there, I'm just gonna do it. I'm like, Allah, I'm like, just one client just to get started. I'm like, just to get the ball rolling. This is something I really want to do. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing really right now when it comes to like selling or any of that stuff. I'm like, I know training. I'm like, I just want at least one just this week to like, just get started. I get to the masjid. I park my car, and it was literally a moment of laziness where I'm like, should I take my jacket off? And it was kind of hot, and I had already taken a few steps away from the door, right, from my car door, and I was just literally having a moment of like laziness where I'm like, forget it, just leave it on, who cares? Let's just go inside. Literally, that was it. I walk in, I get to the shoe rack area, and literally someone just right behind me just taps, "Hey, are you a personal trainer?" I turn around, I'm like, "Yeah, I am." And he's like, "Yeah, I've been looking for one." I'm like, "Really?" I'm like, and in my head, I'm like, I've been looking for a client. So then, so that's how, that was my first one ever. And then, so he came and met me at the gym afterwards, like a few hours after. And he's like, Belal, and he's sitting down with so he brought his son with him too. And till this day, he's still a really good friend. He's like an older brother to me. Like I couldn't have asked for a better first client, because he is a very well-off member of the community who, like a high executive and various different positions or roles that he's had over the years, and like the perfect type of mentor you could have asked for. And he's sitting there with the son, and he's like, Bilal, on the way here, on the way to the masjid, I was doing dua. He's like, Allah, I need to get in shape. I need to get healthier, to find me someone who can help me with that. And I was just like, wow, subhanAllah, this is like
both prayers are accepted.
Yeah, I'm like, subhanAllah, this is meant to be. Because I'm like, I could have taken my jacket off and it would just been a regular t-shirt, and we just walked in and sat down and prayed in salah and so forth and left.
But you've seen your buff too, and
right. But yeah, so that's the one thing. It's like, it's just, so from there, I'm like, I think that really gave me motivation. I'm like, subhanAllah, I'm like, this is really meant to be. And then from there, just the ball kept rolling, and then mind you, there was a lot of ups and downs. It's actually probably more downs than ups. Running a business is something that's not easy by any stretch of imagination. Especially in today's, it's very interesting. Like you listen to social media, everyone's like, oh, you want to be your own boss, or you want to be CEO, and blah blah blah. I don't think people know what they're actually asking for. There's no such thing as a day off. There's no such thing as a sick day. Yep. I'm like, I have friends who are like, I got health benefits. I'm like, what are those? Like, there's no such thing as that. Yeah. Or I have a sick day. I'm like, what's a sick day? Like, you're getting paid for a sick day? I'm like, right. And because they always look at the end where some people, a very small group of people who make a lot of money, and they're at the other side of it, and they're like, oh, look at me now. And they're trying to envy that because they see it on social media, but not realizing, wait, you have no idea what the person went through, or if they're even telling you the whole story. Yeah. Right. So it's very difficult. I enjoy it, but that's just the type of person I am, where I like a little bit of chaos. It just like, it's usually when things are going really well, I get lazier. It's when things are almost, there's a little chaotic, is when I kind of thrive. It annoys my wife, but she knows it too. But I guess that's what allows me to continue to keep going. But yeah, so then from there, we started our own, I started my own training. But then I started taking a lot of programs and courses on the side. Like I was spending way more money than the average person on learning business, marketing, and training at the same time, right? I was taking so, and then at this, so I would be training for say 5-6 hours. And then from there, I would go to a local coffee shop and just sit there until like midnight, sometimes 1 a.m. just working. It was like the barista there, I'd walk in and she would know how long I'm going to be there depending on what I would ask. If I asked for like a tea, she knew I'd be gone in a few hours. If I asked for a black coffee, she knows I'm going to be there till like 12, 1 o'clock. And then so it's interesting because like some of the staff there, they got to know me pretty well because they know I'd be there really late. And it was one of the few coffee shops in the area that were 24 hours as well. And so they would bring me by like a snack or two here and there because they know I'm going to be there for a while. And then so from there, I started learning about online training, and it was just getting introduced to the world on a bigger scale, on being able to do it. And then from there, I started taking a lot of courses in there and understanding how to be able to go about that. Then started signing people up for that. And then from there, my wife, who's a registered dietitian, her master's in public health, then we started really putting everything together. And I started, figuring out how to be able to do both. Right, training online and providing nutrition. Nutrition's easy online, obviously, because you don't need to actually ever see the person for nutrition. Yeah. How to be able to go online, that was a tricky thing. Not just on getting people to understand that it's very doable and actually really productive, but as well as how to be able to deliver it. Yeah. Right, effectively. Yeah. Right. And one thing I realized over the years is that online clients are more likely than not see better results than in person.
Interesting.
And the one thing I realized was because the onus is on them to have to really work, right? So, for example, if you see me say 2 or 3 times in a week, the workout's definitely going to be amazing, right? Because I will be able to detect your energy levels, what you need to do, how you're feeling, all that stuff, and make the adjustments as needed. So definitely the workouts, obviously. But you're coming and working out with me for that hour, right? What you do outside of those 3 hours is almost just, if not more important than just those 3 hours that you're seeing me, right? But on top of that, once they would stop seeing me, it was hard for them to still continue to keep showing up.
Yeah.
Right. Because it was like, but with you it was different. I'm like, yeah, but the whole thing is you got to still keep going. Right. And then when it was online, they're already setting off going on their own. Right. They already have that mentality that they're getting a program. They're getting everything there virtually through me. Right. But they've got to show up and they've got to go get it done.
Makes
right?
sense, yeah.
And then so I started seeing that right off the bat, they already had this habit of just showing up. And that's the biggest thing, is that it's not necessarily the workouts or nutrition, but it's about teaching people. And that's where kind of my psychology background kind of worked out in that sense, is getting people to understand the importance of being consistent and just showing up. Right. And just keep going at it. Right. And then so from there, as we started to see that change and saw the benefits, from there, then we started opening it up to, members all over the world and bringing people on. And obviously COVID happened, and, that kind of made it a little bit easier for people to understand. Right. Because before that, nobody had a Zoom account. Now everybody has a Zoom account.
The world became
right?
remote.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. So that kind of made it easier. Before it was like, hey, what is Zoom, or what is, talking online? It was weird. Now it's not. Now it's the norm. Right. So, from there we started growing from that. Right. So that was one thing, is like, in the beginning, it was like, if you'd asked me when I first started that this is what I would be doing, that I would be, having clients all over the world and helping people in like thousands of people all around the world, and helping them become healthier and losing weight, getting stronger with nutrition and fitness and so forth, while sitting at home, I would have thought that was impossible.
That makes sense. I mean, sometimes it takes a bit of time to find your actual purpose. A lot of people go to university and they've been told you got to study this or that degree or field just by their parents, but they haven't found their calling quite yet. Yeah. But once you get out in the world and you kind of figure out what you want to actually do. And it was interesting, you were talking about, how you were learning to scale up as a personal trainer and that whole kind of industry and business. There's a popular influencer. I've seen his stuff on social media, Brandon Carter.
Yeah,
he calls himself King Keto or something.
Yeah, he's a
he's interesting.
Yeah, I've seen some of his stuff. So he was one of like the first ones, not first ones, but he was really big on YouTube a long time ago. I haven't seen a lot of his stuff. It's like trainers, a lot of these guys, nothing against them or anything, right? But a lot of these trainers, they have like this trajectory, where they start off in fitness, they do really well, and then they start transitioning to business, teaching, right? Exactly. Mind you, it's not a bad thing, because like anyone who's successful at business understands, and this is actually where the vast majority of fail at any business that they run. They get so sucked into just what they're doing, not realizing they're running a business, that they need to understand business first before they do anything else, right? Like even with me, like I do far more business and marketing and so forth than I do actually fitness and nutrition, right? And that's the one thing a lot of times people. So when you're learning so much of that, you start to see, I can actually teach this to others, right? Exactly, so you always see that like that progression.
Yeah, because I saw that he basically teaches other personal trainers on how to scale their businesses and go from in-person to online, like you were mentioning. Yeah. And then, 5x, 10x their income that way, because they can use their time more effectively. Yeah. So how did you kind of build your maybe credibility as a personal trainer? I know people want to if you start showing your services, people want to know how are you going to help me? How do you look like? The first thing somebody will judge a personal trainer is their overall fitness, health. If they're muscular, if you're trying to find clients that are going to build muscle or lose weight or whatever it is. Yeah. So how is that?
So with us was one thing that was always really important for me within the business was what's our values. Right. And it's interesting when you see our clientele, it's always the same, where it's like, there are certain Islamic values that we will not compromise. Right. So you will never see me take my shirt off on social media. And then, even when they talk about the men's privates, like from, belly button to knee. Yeah. But I still even then won't do that where cover that part and just show the top. I'm like, because, you know, for me, like, it's always really been really important being surrounded by the right teachers, right? And I know they will do my Slav very quickly if they ever saw a picture like that pop up anywhere, because they're like, you know, what is the purpose? Yes, you're trying to teach, but you can teach without having to. It's like, imagine if, you know, any scholar or anyone or a doctor you walk into and they're like, all right, so let me tell you everything I know. Right? It's like, you don't need to do that every time, right?
Yeah.
Your actions can show, the results you've brought your clients can show that, right? But also your humbleness can show that too, right? Like, I don't need to, you know, take off my shirt and be like, look what I did. It is very effective. It is very, very effective, and it works very, very well. But even our members, when we had to do before and after pictures, anytime we post them or anything, we told them, no, keep your shirt on, right? Because there's a level of haya that's really important, right? And there's a level of, like, you know, having that humbleness is really important as well, right? Because you start to really walk that line, right? Because it's hard. Like, you post that picture and you know you look good, and you know, I'm like, you know, especially for me, like, I have big shoulders, and I'm like, I know, I mean, even when I would just wear a t-shirt, I'm like, people are like, I'm like, oh, you got big chest and stuff, and I'm like, I'm not trying to show anything, right? But then how do you find that fine line of having that pride kick in?
Yeah,
right. So it's like,
definitely an ego boost.
Of course it is, right? Like, anyone who says, oh no, you know, I'm just doing it because I just want others to come down this path, and I'm like, yeah, maybe, but there's a very, very fine line, and maybe they trust themselves, and to each their own. And I'm not judging for them. I'm a guy, but I know myself. I'm like, so for me, I'm not going to trust myself to just be like, all right, for a few extra clients, and you know, let's, you know, stroke my ego in that sense, right? And kind of have the potential chance of kind of getting any sorts of pridefulness. Yeah. Right. So I'm like, okay, if I can avoid that, I might, and if that means maybe making a few, you know, having a few less members, that's okay. But then the members that are coming, there's more quality in them anyways, right? Because they're coming with the right purpose. So like with us, a lot of them, like, you know, husband and wives are looking to get married, or, you know, they're a little bit more on the practicing side, and they're looking to kind of, you know, be healthier, overall, lose weight, get stronger, and so forth, right? But they're just making sure that, you know, that's always really important. Is I think that's what's really made it really effective to us showing credibility, is that, because to demonstrate fitness nutrition isn't hard, right? Especially when you know it, right? Like, when you know what you're doing, and you've been studying it for as long as I have, right? I can look at someone's squat in less than 5 seconds, be able to pick out what it is that they need to change and adjust and so forth, right? Like, even before they start, just their standing position, be like, well, right? But that's not what kind of stands out. It's always the other side. So if you ever look through our social media, there's certain values that we won't compromise on, right? There's certain things that we won't do, and there's certain things I'm like, you know, already there's so much always being exposed on social media. I'm like, we don't need to go out of our way to expose any more than it's already being exposed. For sure. Right. Yeah. And so that kind of, you know, it's kind of walking that fine line as much as possible. Even like same thing like music, for example. I know there's a difference of opinion for some, and again, anything that we do, we never judge anybody else, right? So I'm like, you know, so for us, it's always like, you know, like nasheeds and so forth, and sometimes, you know, they're not. It gets it's always like similar ones and so forth, right? So it's like, okay, finding a way to go around that takes a lot longer, because, for example, the algorithm, if you take the most popular sound music and so forth, your reach grows significantly, right? So that's actually a thing. If you want to grow your social media following, just follow the trend of the music that is going at that time on Instagram, TikTok, or whatever, right? And your reach will grow, and people will stay on that reel a lot longer, or TikTok a lot longer. But then we sacrifice that as well, because I'm like, no, I don't want that on there, right? And so things like that, you know, just I think that's kind of one thing that kind of gives us, I guess, some level of credibility, is that, you know, there's certain, and on top of that, it's funny. I always say is like, when you have an influencer, not that I remember one, because I hate that word, influencer. So one thing is like, because I've had a few people, they're like, hey, do you know so-and-so? And like, yeah. And they're like, and so it's like, how do you know someone's like legit? Because what you see on social media, and then when you see in person, sometimes it's very different, right? And I've had that so many times, right? Like, that's why there's the other thing, like, if you ever hear or don't ever meet them, right? Because it's like, it's never going to be the same of what you kind of, right? So my only thing is, if you have an idea of what area they live in, just talk to some of the local masjids. If they never see them, there's your red flag, right? Interesting. Just ask your local masjids. Like, do you ever see so-and-so show up? If they're from, I don't know, if they're from Toronto, right? But like, we all know the massages in Toronto, right? Like, all right, do you know East End, West End? You know, which area? Oh, okay, they live around there. Oh, okay, cool. You know, you can very quickly find out, yo, does that guy show up to the masjid ever? It's like, yeah, no, Yes, no, maybe. All right, you have an idea. Like, why is he not showing up?
Yeah.
Now, no, I'm not saying that you judge him based on that, because I'm like, maybe he just travels a lot, right? And I don't know, right? But you can get an idea of how involved they really are, right, in the community that they live, and not just involved in their phone. That's so to speak.
That makes sense. So what have you seen in terms of the main challenges in your clients that you see?
It depends. It depends on the demographics. So, for example, single ones, understanding how much time they actually have, right? Because like it's interesting when you talk to a single guy. Like for me, obviously, I do a single guys, and then my wife will do the single women. It's interesting because I don't think they appreciate how much time they have, right? And so getting them to understand, like, listen, the only schedule for you that matters is your own. You don't have to battle with anyone else's schedule. I'm like, if you look at someone who's married with kids, they're worried about their schedule, their spouse's schedule, plus their kids' schedules, and then all the other extracurricular activities, their own work. They got all this stuff going on. You just got to wake up and just go about your day, right? Yeah. Whatever you're saying, right? So you have time. So understand, and so try, and then from there, obviously for us, the cultural aspect. Right, because for us it's always important not giving up your culture, right, to be healthy. And so for us it's like, okay, figuring out how to be able to, okay, so if it's a single guy, if they're living at home, most likely mom's doing cooking. Okay, so how do you navigate that? How do you have that conversation with your mom? How do you go about being able to create that relationship where the food can change a little bit? It doesn't have to change completely, but there's certain elements that need to change, right? And then for married couples, working off each other, right? And then always understanding that time is going to be tougher because being married, have kids, but you don't actually need that much time, right? A single guy might be able to work out, say 4, maybe 5 times in a week, right? A married, 3 hours in a week, 168 hours in a week, right? You're less than 3 hours, right? That's nothing, right? Understanding that, but then also making kids' time more active. Mm-hmm. Making sure that and then going maybe for a walk with the wife, and then going and doing things with the kids that's active, right? And then if you end up missing a workout, but you were being physically active by taking them out and doing stuff, alhamdulillah, that's beautiful, right? And so a lot of times it's just it's not necessarily getting them to to work out and so forth. It's just making them understand that time is there. You just got to prioritize the time better. Right. And then when it comes to nutrition, understanding that, hey, you don't need to give up your rice. You don't need to give up your bread. Right. You can still keep that stuff and still be, still be in shape and still lose weight. And
that's what I was going to ask about. I mean, especially with the Muslim community and say maybe the Muslim South Asian community, there's a lot of challenges with, with the diet, with the lifestyle that there's certain lifestyle factors that are at play. So what are some of the challenges you see with, especially the Muslim clientele, maybe the South Asian Muslim clientele?
So I've obviously have friends that are trainers and stuff, and they would always reach out to me. They're like, "Man, I got this client. This guy just won't lose weight." I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "What's his background?" Right? He's like, "Yo, he's from Pakistan." I'm like, or Pakistan. I'm like, "Okay, cool." I'm like, "What's he eating?" Right? And even though I already know the answer to that as soon as he said that. And he's like, no, this guy said he is having, just some chicken, some rice, and some vegetables. I'm like, no, he's not. He's like, no, that's what he said. I'm like, no, he's having that. But he's having a mountain of rice, a few little pieces of chicken, filled with like curry on top.
Oily
and then
curry.
Yeah, and then which is like devoured in oil. And then I'm like, he's having maybe a cucumber on the side with maybe some tomatoes, which is actually a fruit. So I'm like, that's what, and he's like, I'm like, tell him to give you a picture. He's like, all right, send me a picture. He starts laughing. He's like, bro, you're right. I'm like, yeah. But that's the thing. It's the cultural thing, right? Yeah. So then the thing is like, he doesn't need to get rid of all of that rice, right? Because that's the first thing that gets vilified, right? When you actually when you listen to these conversations, we're like, oh, no carbs or no this, no that, right? It's the amount that we're taking in, right? Like rice or bread isn't bad. It's the quantity that we're taking in. Like we're going an entire day without moving. Like the vast majority of people, the most physical activity they do is when they walk from their house door to their car, or when they park their car at work and then they walk into their office. That's the most physical activity they're doing in an average day. Even if they're working out, say 3 or 4 times in a week,
that's crazy.
That's their most average time that they're actually. So for an hour, congratulations, you did a really good job. But then what are you doing throughout the week? You're not doing anything, right? Those 3-4 hours, you got to make sure you're still going for a walk. every day, or you're still doing something throughout the week that allows you to be a little bit more active. So then, yes, you got to be able to control, what you're doing. So that's the one thing. It's like understanding that you don't have to give up your culture, but there are certain changes that you need to add. Obviously, your curries shouldn't be completely just oil with very little anything else, right? And then your plate shouldn't be a mountain of rice that you go for seconds. That's the biggest thing, is no seconds. Having your one meal, right? Same thing with bread. Having your one meal. Pick one, right? Don't pick both, right? And then so that's always important. Understanding that you need to kind of simplify a little bit more within that, and then you start to see a lot better results, and they're still able to kind of enjoy their food and still able to enjoy themselves and see results long term. But yeah, that ultimately plays the biggest factor.
So I mean, a lot of people, especially in our community, the South Asian community, Muslim community overall, they are suffering. A lot of people are suffering from years of bad diet, years of making the wrong choices, and then because of that, they've now in their maybe their 40s, 50s, and they're pre-diabetic or maybe fully diabetic, and they have cholesterol, and they have a lot of weight that they've gained, and now they're suffering from a lot of chronic illnesses, and that's advanced to that stage. So, what are some of the ways that you help people manage those illnesses now that they've gone to that level?
So the really cool thing about our company, obviously having my wife who's a registered dietitian, and so having her master's in this and nutrition, understanding how to be able to go about that. We'll also request their blood work as well. So we'll sit down and go over the blood work to see like their full blood work to understand, okay, what's going on, what are some like some of the markers and so forth, and what are we deficient in, and what's been going on. The thing is, especially if you're from like say the South Asian community, you're kind of already have a higher risk of a lot of this
That's
stuff.
That's why I
right?
specifically mentioned.
Yeah. So and so very easily, it's not that we're doing it very easily. We also tip the scales pretty hard in the negative way. But on top of that, you start to see that, it starts to happen at a younger age, but it's also about the habits that we're choosing beforehand. Right? Like we're not very proactive, unfortunately, right? We're always reactive. Once the doctor shows up, once we're like, oh, my chest or my energy is just low, or I just don't feel good, then we end up, okay, I need to make a change, right? When it comes to obviously cholesterol, it's very, very manageable to do it without medication, right? And we've had numerous amount of clients that we've been able to be like, hey, speak to your doctor, see if you can put it off for at least 3-4 months. Let's work on this, and then go back. And they're like, okay, the vast majority of the time the doctor says. So the thing with our like doctors, when you speak to them, especially specifically with regards to like cholesterol and so forth, the one thing that they always, the reason why they're so quick to add medication is because they're just going based on history as well, right? Or like the vast majority of people coming in, they're like, oh, I'm going to make a change. And they're like, no, you're not, because I've known you for a long time. And clearly you talk more than you actually do, right? And so that's the unfortunate part. So then doctors, they've just become so accustomed to just being like, no, I don't want to hear it. Just take this. I'm going to sign this off. Just go get the pill and just, come back and see me in a few months, right?
A lot of people, they're on statin drugs, a lot of people, and that's it.
And they just think effects. And then so we see it across the board all the time where they're like, we'll be like, all right, just give it 3-4 months, see if your doctor's okay with it. And 99.9% of the time, they'll be like, all right, fine. You're working with the registered dietitian. All right, fine. Let's see in 3-4 months. And every single time they're like,
it's improved.
Awesome. Yeah, and because it's not that difficult, right? There's certain changes that need to be made and adjusted, and so once you make those changes and adjustments, because the thing with us is always going through a full assessment. Like we really want to get to know you. We're never going to give you something that's like a cookie cutter program or anything, right? We want to make sure that's accustomed to you, so that you're really going to see the results, but it fits your schedule as well, right? Same thing with like nutrition and so forth. If you're not a fan of broccoli, there's a million vegetables to choose from. I'm not going to give you broccoli to eat, right? So that's the one thing is like finding something that's going to fit the person that they're going to be able to enjoy and appreciate and keep going, right? And then same thing obviously with when it comes to like diabetes and so forth and everything else. When you're at a high risk of it, it's not hard to get down from it, right? But there's certain lifestyle changes that you have to be committed to. Otherwise, then on the other side of it, you're going to be hooked onto something. Not literally, but you're going to be on something in order for you just to manage, right? And I don't think anybody wants to live that life where they're like, this medication I need this medication to live, right? Like for me, when I think about my own like fitness, I'm like, inshallah, like I want to be able to be in a mindset where like, that when I'm older, I don't ever have to look to my kids to take care of me. right? And that was like an older generation thing. What they got older, the kids just, right? And I'm like, that's fine, but that's not something I want to do. I want to be able to tell my kids, no, I'm good. You know, your dad and mom are good. We can handle ourselves. We can take care of ourselves. We're good. You guys do your thing. You know, we don't need, inshallah, you know, Allah alam, like, you know, but at least I can say that, you know, we did everything in our power to be able to say that, right? And that's the one thing I think everybody has to ask themselves. Can you honestly say that you've actually put in the time, right? And that's why you have all these fad diets that are so popular, right? Is because people aren't willing to be accountable for their own actions, right? So they'll blame carbohydrates, they'll blame fats, they'll blame meat, they'll blame vegetables, they'll blame everything, right? So if you're a carnivore, you're going to blame vegetables. If you're a vegetarian, you're going to blame meat. If you're no carbs, then you're going to blame bread and rice. But no one's ever willing to just take accountability. Like, when was the last time that you actually, for 6, 8, or 3 months, even at the bare minimum 3 months, been consistently eating effectively to your schedule, to your routine, to allow you to have the energy and not surpass your daily calories, and been properly working out consistently, right? And if you actually ask the vast majority of people, it's a very, very small percentage of people that have actually been committed to something that they've consistently done. And it's because, like, if you follow social media or anything, you know, if you ask one group of people, vegetables are bad, okay, fine. Fruits are bad, okay, fine. Meat's bad, okay, fine. Carbohydrates are bad, okay, fine. Well, technically fats as well, okay, fine.
Everything's bad.
Everything's bad. It's okay to drink water. Well, it's filtered. You know, okay, fine. It's filtered now. But how much did the process, you know, did it go through, and what's its, you know, it's like what level of pH is, and like, come on, man, like what like, can you? And air is polluted as well, so it's right. It's like, what are we supposed to take in, right? So that's the one. And like, there's no you know, there's no one thing that's gonna just set everything right. You've got to be willing to commit to understanding, right? And the thing is, like, when you live your life, and say you're like 25 or 35 or 45, you've lived all those lives just doing what you want. To expect to just turn over within a short few days and not have any source of resistance is just being naive. Right. It sounds kind of harsh, but it's true. Yeah. Right. Like, you have a very set way of doing things. Right. If someone brings out dessert, you just never say no. Right. If you want to order something, like, you think about it, like, we live like royalty now. Like, kings of olden days don't compare to the way we live.
That's right.
Right. Like, we drive around in cars faster than any chariot that they could have ever imagined. Right. And a million times more comfortable that they could have imagined, with air conditioning and so forth. Inside of our house, we can sit and get a cuisine from any type of part of the world. You know, whether one day we want to have Chinese, one day we want to have, you know, Indian, one day we want to have, you know, something else. We could have and delivered to our door. Right. It's not even, we don't have to leave our houses anymore. Delivered right to our door. And then if you have kids, you don't even have to get up off the sofa. You just be like, yo, go get food and bring it on my table. And then, you know, you turn on the TV and you can have every form of entertainment in whatever language you want. That's and whatever genre you want, like everything. No other king in the world has ever had that type of entertainment at their fingertips, present to them right away. Right. So, you know, everything in technology makes us lazier, makes us sit down more, right? The first thing I would say is delete all those apps. There's absolutely no reason. And on top of that, it's like ridiculously expensive. Anyone who ever actually does their own finances understands that those are ridiculous. I'm at a point where I'm like, I've taken off all of those apps, and I'm like, yo, if you want to order out, I'll go pick it up. I'm good. I'm like, I'll go drive 10 minutes because it's cheaper on gas than it is what the fees you're paying. I'm like, and on top of that, the situation in the economy isn't great. So I'm like, anyone complain about money, I'm like, stop ordering from these places. It's cheaper to just buy grocery and just cook yourself, or just go to the restaurant. It's always cheaper. The prices are cheaper, and the delivery, there's no delivery fee and everything else. I'm like, just go pick it up.
A lot of people complain about, you know, eating right is very expensive. So you got to get high quality ingredients, maybe whole foods and stuff like that, and stay away from the processed food products that are mass produced and they can be cheaper. And but then when you look at, you know, what kind of expenditure they have on, especially eating out, like if you go and buy a steak from a restaurant, you're spending like $40, $45, $50, depending.
One steak does not cost that much in a meat store.
Yeah, and then it's a tiny steak, like 6 ounce, 8 ounce, whatever it is. Exactly. You can go and get like 3 of those steaks, maybe even bigger size for you know, for the same amount of money, and then just make it at home. And enjoy it.
And that's the one thing. If it's a one-off, no problem, right? But if the average person's eating out 3-4 times a week, right? That's expensive. That's very expensive. And on top of that, that's after a full day of eating. And when you're ordering from a restaurant, their concern isn't nutrition. Their concern is taste. So when that's the only thing that matters, they're only worried about your palate. So they will add everything and anything and as many calories into it as possible. You have no idea how much is actually hidden in there.
Yeah.
So now after a full day, you've just taken an extra 1,500 calories
That's
or 2,000
right. Yeah.
calories for all you know.
That's right. Most people will go to a restaurant, they'll be like, did that taste good? And did they leave full?
Yeah.
So if they maximize the calories and then increase the sodium, increase whatever else is in
Yeah.
there, and you're going to be leaving happy and leaving them good reviews.
Yeah.
But in the kind of the influx of all of the information that's out there, misinformation, disinformation, and just too much information, a lot of people will get confused. They look at all of these things. They're like, okay, this is too much and I can't do all of these things, so I'm not going to get started.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the best way to get started is the simplest approach and go back to the basics on health and fitness. So what would you recommend as the kind of like the top 3 recommendations for somebody to just get started on their fitness journey or their health journey?
So first and foremost, routine is really important, right? So one thing I always say is like, sit down, ignore everything else, and look at your schedule. Everyone has a schedule, regardless if you make a schedule or not. Everybody has a schedule. You know what time you have to be at work, or if say you're a housewife and you're at home, you know what time you have to wake up to get the kids ready, right? Or if you're a dad who's say working from home, you know what time you have to be up. Everyone knows what time they have to be up, regardless if they're going to work or if they're not going to work. Because you still have a routine. Everybody has a routine. Everybody has a set time that they have to wake up. They understand what time lunch is going to be around. They understand what time they're going to be off work, or if they're not off work, they know what time the kids are going to be home. What time kids are going to be taking a nap. Like every parent knows what time is their nap, what time is their kids' nap time, right? Like our routines are pretty scheduled right down to that, even though it's not written. Like for example, my son, he's 2.5. Like the girls, obviously they're old enough, they don't have any nap times or anything. They're in school anyways, but like I know what time he's napping, right? So everyone knows that, but it's not a time that we have scheduled down. It's just we know what time he's napping, right? So we all have our life scheduled, whether we write it or not. So then it's like, okay, might as well write it out to see where you can fit time in. And a lot of times it's people's competition isn't the fact that they want to do something. Their biggest competition is Netflix. Their biggest competition is their phones. That's their biggest competition for time. It's not anything else. Kids don't require 24 hours a day of your time. Your spouse doesn't need you, 24 hours a day. There's a certain time and place for it, but you still have 30, 40 minutes, even if you don't have an hour, no problem, right? Even 30, 40 minutes scheduled out throughout the week, right? So 30 minutes on Monday at say 5 p.m. or say 12 p.m. The little one's taking a nap. I'm gonna do a quick 30-minute workout, right? And then say Wednesday after the kids come from school, once they're eating, I'm just gonna quickly go into another room, 30-minute workout. On Saturday, the kids wake up late. I'm gonna wake up maybe an hour before them, do a quick 30-minute workout. That's an hour and a half in the entire week that you just started with that routine, right? And then, hey, every evening before the kids, it's almost their bedtime, we're just gonna go for a quick walk. It's summertime, we're just gonna go quick 20-minute walk with the whole family, right? It just helps everybody just kind of deload from the day, helps calm everything down, and you have a much better sleep afterwards, right? But then adding that, it just seems a lot at first, but when you actually write it down, you just start adding that element. I'm like, because what's the other side of it? You're just gonna be sitting around. No one's working for 12 hours straight at home, right? No one's actually busy for that many hours throughout the day, right? But it's just being honest about adding those little things, right? I didn't say go to the gym, right? I'm not saying worry about what weights you're going to be lifting. Put on YouTube and just put a workout on if you want, right? Or just if you know a few exercises, do some push-ups and squats and just keep it simple if you want. And do a few sit-ups and be like, all right. But once you start, it starts to grow.
That's right.
Right? You take that first step and be like, all right, let me see if I can. And the same thing with us, like when we have a program, I always tell people like, because they're like, oh, don't make it too hard. I'm like, I'm not. I'm like, if it's too hard after your first workout, then I did something wrong. Because my goal isn't to put you through a wall, right? There's a time and place that it will come. There's a time and place that, but I'm like, you're not at that point yet. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Don't look at others. Don't worry about what others have done, right? Just focus on yourself. You're not at that point yet. And inshallah, you will be, right? But right now, just start. That's the biggest thing you have to do. And so that's the first and foremost, right? So from the fitness side, just physical activity, just start walking, get moving, right? Especially when we have like elder clients and they're like, okay, so what exercise? I'm like, listen, we're going to walk every day. That's what you're going to do. You're going to walk every single day. 20 minutes, you're going to go for a walk.
Walking is powerful.
Right. That's very, exactly. Yep. Right. Even those who are women who are postpartum, right. And for them, it's really big because they want to get that weight back down and so forth. So they have a huge rush for wanting to do it. So it's like, okay, no problem. And that's actually, my wife is really effective for that, obviously. Right. But the biggest thing is in the beginning, all right, let's just walk. Right. There's a little bit more complicated when it comes to workout because obviously when you go through postpartum, there's a little bit more, it gets a little bit more trickier because you have to be really mindful. But again, a lot of times it's just, even if you just start walking every single day, right? Something as simple as that, that's the bare minimum that you can start with. And then same thing with nutrition, right? No seconds, right? Your carbohydrates, you keep the plate simple, right? If you look at the entire plate, you have your protein, quarter of your plate carbohydrates, half the plate vegetables. Start with that, right? Or just start adding a salad at every meal. One thing we always tell our members, don't ever try to tell a family member to be healthy or to eat or do anything. Just don't say anything because people take it very personal when you talk to them about health and fitness, right? They almost take it as
so I've always kind of done that myself, is be that kind of person. Especially just in the immediate family.
Yeah.
With parents and siblings. I won't really say to anybody else, but be like, especially if somebody, it's kind of call people out. I think they can be slightly offended at first, but then you kind of eventually get through. So if you have that relationship,
if you have a very specific, and the reason why I'd say the opposite is because one thing we've noticed is that just from experience and seeing members and so forth is that like you see it all the time when someone picks up when someone's eating a salad, they're like, oh, were you dieting, right? Or like and they're like, oh, dieting, like it's like that irks me. Like for us it's even worse because like if we go to any party, anywhere we go, if I'm grabbing a dessert, right, always get that comment. Or it's lined up at the buffet, they're like, oh, I'm gonna watch what you're eating. I'm like, it's like almost a given. It's funny, like if I'm out with like friends and stuff, I'm like, watch, someone's gonna say it, and like someone says it and they're like, I'm like, you start placing bets for this. I'm like, this is ridiculous. But it just happens every single time, doesn't matter where we are. And I'm like, yo, this is my cheat meal, let me enjoy myself, right? But the thing is like, people take that stuff very personal, right? Because I was like, oh no, it's the same thing goes back to, I'm not the one making any mistakes, right? The mistake is there's a secret out there, right? Like what I was saying before, that everything is bad and people aren't willing to take onus of their own mistakes and it's just like, oh no, I'm not doing anything wrong. It's there's a secret out there they're not telling you. No, there's no secret. It's literally, there's no secret, right? And that's the one thing, is that people don't want to take ownership of the mistakes that they're making. So the one thing we always tell them is like, don't say anything to anybody. To no one. And if anyone says anything to you, just nod along and just ignore it. But when you show up, be the one to show up with the salad and just don't say anything and just put it on the table, right? Or when you go to your parents' house, for example, on the weekends, or your in-laws on the weekends, just make a salad there if you can, right? If they have some stuff, or if you can't, bring it over and just place it on the table and don't say anything, right? And because if it's on the table, it's for everyone. You'll notice people will be like, all right, let me try this, right? And they'll be like, oh, that tastes pretty good. Right, especially if you know how to make a salad. Like I love salads because they're done really well, and they taste amazing if you do it right. Right, that doesn't mean you devour it with dressing.
To throw a wrench in the works a little bit, is salads necessary to to help your health and fitness journeys? That you specifically mentioned salad. Is that something that we need? You'd ask people to necessarily include?
Yeah.
To start beginning their change.
Yeah. You need the vitamins and nutrients, right? The micronutrients that come along with it, that plays a huge part. Regardless of what you add in salad, if it's kale or romaine lettuce or anything else, those greens are really, really important, right? And then, if you add whatever vegetables you want, peppers, or, you can cucumbers or whatever you want, it's very, very important, right? That has a huge element to, the micronutrients that you need, the vitamins that you need, that plays a huge part in just your overall health, right? But that's the one thing, is like, even if you add something, healthy to the table, people will take, right? And if you know how to make food taste good, right? The reason why healthy food doesn't taste good to people is because they haven't taken the time to make it taste good. It's like me, like I love cheesecake, but if I made it, it'd be disgusting because I don't know how to make cheesecake, right? It's the same thing if someone who doesn't know how to make something that's healthy, right, makes something healthy, because they haven't taken the time to make it taste good, right? So that's another thing, taking time to make sure food tastes good, right? But people will start taking that. They'll start taking the salads and so forth and putting it on the plate, like, oh, it's not bad. All right, man, maybe. But on top of that, the reason why you don't say anything is because over time, they start to see the change in you, they start to see the mood change. They start to see the weight loss, and they see you're not saying anything. So they'll ask like, all right, man, what are you doing? Right. And it almost to a point every single time, the members with their family will ask, or friends will ask them like, all right, man, you haven't been saying anything. What have you been doing? Right. And then now they're open to wanting to listen. Right. But if you're the first one to jump in and be like, this is what you should be doing. All right, Mr. Know-it-all, leave me alone. I just want to have my ice cream. Leave me alone. Okay. I had a long day of work. I'm stressed all day, and someone put a cake in front of me. I'm eating this cake. Leave me alone. Right. But as opposed to, I really want to have this cake, but this guy's onto something. What have you been doing? Right. I'm still going to eat that cake right now, but I want to know maybe a few days from now I might be interested.
That's
right. That's the one thing. It's like, it's how you go about it. And it's the same thing with our, like when we want to go with our members. That's why we're not like, we'll have people tell us certain things. I'm like, we won't be like, all right, cut everything out off the bat. Right. All right, you're vilified for everything. You're not. We live in a society that's always perpetuating us to eat a certain way and do certain things, that it's hard to kind of get out of that. Right. It's, when was the last time you showed up to any party or anything? And it's like, you're able to just be like not worried about the amount of calories that meal is going to be. Oh, yeah. Right. Mind you, a party probably shouldn't be that anyways, but it's like going to someone's house for food, and it's like generally you're on the more concerned side. Yeah. Right. Like for me, like, protein's huge. Right.
Yes.
And so going to most places, you'll have like chicken. That's the one thing. That's when I'm like, okay, good. You'll always have like some sort of like a chicken, like chicken legs or something like that. So I'm like, I'm able to make do with that. But outside of that, everything else is, especially if you go like family's house, it's going to be some sort of curry. It's going to be, just 2-3 different type of carbs and so forth. But even the salads they make is going to be drenched in like mayo or and like all these other dressings and stuff. So I'm like, okay, this is a dessert. Right.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's the one thing. It's like, okay, right. So that obviously becomes difficult, right? But if you start normalizing certain elements of it, then it starts to become a lot easier over time.
How important is the concept of BMI to people? You just use that as a measure. A lot of people will take their weight measurement, they're 185 pounds, 200 pounds, 225 pounds, whatever it is. And based on their height, this is the BMI. And basically everybody is either overweight or even, obese.
Yeah, you'll have people who are really in shape, technically be out of shape, right? Like you had a famous case in it was the U.S. military, I believe it was, where they had certain soldiers that were just massive. And then you'll have certain professionals come in and be like, oh, their BMI's too, but their energy's fast. Like their energy's really good. They're fast. They're moving. They're like technically according to BMI, so it depends. If they're for a certain segment of the population, it does work really effectively, right? But then for the certain segment, it doesn't. Like for me, like it wouldn't work. I would technically be on the higher side, right? Even though you don't want to race me or lift anything,
because some people are also like might be in the normal range of BMI, but they're basically like not skinny fat.
Yeah. And that's another thing, right? So it's very interesting that you mentioned skinny fat. It's like I feel like the last 4 calls I've had, it's just like a weird trend I'm on right now. It's like the last 4 or 5 calls I've had, all of them were all in that skinny fat category. So it's just like strange that I just had. But that's the one thing. It's like. If you have that, well, actually, to be honest with you, that's often worse than being skinny fat than being overweight. Simply because, obviously, because technically, medically, like when you go to BMI, they're like, oh no, you're fine, right? Or even if you just look at someone, you're like, oh, you look good, you're skinny, right? But their t-shirt's a little bit looser, so you can't really see their gut, right? That's oftentimes worse because when you look in the mirror, or you look on the scale, you're like overtly, you're like, whoa, I'm getting big. Right, but then when you're skinny fat, you don't notice that. You don't notice, right? You're like those indicators aren't going off, right? Yeah. And it's just genetics, right? There's it's just like spot reduction. Like I can't point to one specific area and be like, all right, I want to lose weight here, right? It's an overall gradual thing, and it's just strictly genetics.
I think the skinny fat is also dangerous, not just because you can, not really understand you're not in optimal health, but because you have such little muscle mass. Mm-hmm. And whatever weight that you do have is basically all fat, that you are very easily predisposed to be pre-diabetic or basically diabetic because there's just no metabolically active muscle around you.
Well, yes. But it's also because, like, for example, say someone who gains weight very quickly, right? They'll look at themselves right away and be like, all right, my pants aren't fitting, right? My shirts are too tight. Right, so those indicators those alarms are going off a lot faster They say it as opposed to someone who's skinny fat.
That's right.
Right, because they're able to be like, all right, man, I can just kind of push this to the side. So that's one of the reasons why they almost hold off a lot later than someone who's just, increasing body fat all over.
That's right.
Because it's a lot different. Like you'll have, if someone, like for example, when wedding season comes and if someone doesn't wear a suit all the time and then they're like, all right, I got the suit. And they're like a few days before, they're like, uh-oh, right? As opposed to someone skinny fat, they're like, I can just, I can tuck this and I'll be good, right? So those alarms aren't going off as opposed to that person be like, yeah, I can't.
So how do what's the best way to get that belly fat down? I think that's the number one thing most people worry about is I want to get my belly down.
So there's no spot reduction, right? It has to be an overall approach, right? Like, so every single time you see like, 3 ways to get rid of your belly or, to burn fat and so forth, or like, 3 exercises, core exercises, like you can do a million sit-ups in a day. It's not going to affect your belly fat,
first,
right?
Yeah.
Right. There's no such thing as spot reduction, right? So like it's like I want to lose weight in just my left arm for some reason, right? It's like you can't do that, right? It's an overall approach, right? Mm-hmm. You have to lower your daily calories. You have to work out in general. Yes, you can build muscle in the core muscles. Right, so as you lose belly fat, your 6-pack abs and so forth has a better chance of showing once that comes down. But it has to be it's going to be a gradual overall approach, right? It's never going to be just like, all right, otherwise, whoever invents that would be an automatic trillionaire, right? Be like, all right, take this one thing or do this one exercise. I can't tell you what it is until you don't pay me $1 million. I will tell you that one exercise, and you have to sign an NDA that you can't tell anybody that one exercise that will get rid of everything. That will get rid of your gut. Unfortunately, it doesn't exist. So every time you see
so what's becoming popular is the Ozempic.
Yeah,
a lot of people are.
But then there's also a lot of health issues and everything else that goes along with it, right? Like, my only thing is, why do you want to be attached to something?
Yeah.
Right. Like, yes, making those changes is a little bit tougher. Yes, it'll take a little bit longer, slightly, right? But the thing is, like, the thing about health and fitness, what a lot of people don't understand is that it's not just about losing weight. Right, it's not just about that superficial aspect, right? Not that there's anything wrong with that. Like, it's fine losing weight and wanting to look good and so forth. Again, if you do it with the right reasons, the right intention, alhamdulillah, go for it, right? But there's a much deeper thing to it, right? There's a huge spiritual component to it.
That's
to simply shoot yourself with a drug as opposed to actually going on that journey, right? 100-pound dumbbell will never be 50 pounds, right? It will always be 100 pounds while it's sitting there. Right, a 50-pound dumbbell will always be a 50-pound dumbbell. That will never lie to you. You'll go outside and someone will be like, "Oh, you're looking good." You have no idea if they're telling you the truth or not, right? For all you know, you could have like food on your beard and your hair disheveled. You have no idea, right? But that 50-pound dumbbell will never lie to you. That weight scale will never lie to you. It might be off by a few pounds here and there because some scales are a little different. That's okay, but it's giving you a range that you're within, right? So those things, that's an important part of the journey because you show up at the gym. There's a reason why you can't lift that. So either it's stress, it's sleep, or you're just not strong enough.
So what you're saying is the objective metrics matter a lot more than the subjective.
It's always, yeah, and that plays a huge part, right? Because being able to go through that struggle, being able to figure out, okay, I have family, I have kids, I have this, I have that. They're all taking my time away, and none of them are giving that time in return. That's just how family and adulting works. So you never really get that time back from anyone, right? But the biggest thing is like being able to push through that resistance, being able to fight through that. On the other side of that is when you really start to become a better version of yourself or a stronger version of yourself as a whole, right? It's never just going to be like, all right, this is, that you're just going to start one thing, it's just going to go smoothly. You're going to have your ups and downs. There's going to be a lot of bumps along the road, but being able to push through that. And then when you set certain goals, when you sit down on a bench and you see the dumbbell rack and you're only at say 40 or 50 and you look on the far side and you see all the heavy ones, you're like, inshallah, I'm going to get there. And then when you finally do, that journey, you remember where you once were. Yeah. You remember it's like, oh man, those 30s and 40s were heavy. Now that's my warm up. This is amazing, right? You appreciate the work that you had to put in. So on the other side of that, like there's this level of growth that is very, very hard to measure. And if you just want to take the lazy way and be like, all right, I'm just going to shoot myself in my leg and now I'm going to lose weight, then that's a choice you can make. And I don't want to come off as judging anybody for doing it. And, for all I know, they've probably done everything. I know, and gone through everything to be able to try to obtain the results. But, yeah, it's for me, working out isn't just about losing weight or just being strong. It's over like there's a journey. And we live a very soft life in the West. We look about what's going on in Palestine. We think about the Muslims around the world and some of the suffering and so forth that they're going through. We live a very soft life. If the hardest thing we have to do in our day-to-day life is show up at a gym and just push a little bit, like and try to get to certain reps and try to get out the door and try to push ourselves to be better, to have more energy and be better overall. That's the toughest thing. And then alhamdulillah, we're already living a very first world life in that sense, right? So a lot of times it's people are just looking for that easy way out. So you just have to ask yourself, why am I looking for this easy way out?
That's right.
Why am I so opposed to this level of resistance, right? And a lot of times people just don't want to have those conversations. They don't want to have those conversations with their nafs, right? Because it's just desires, right? It's just being able to fight those desires, right? So then a lot of times it's like, just look at what's happening with our Palestinian brothers and sisters, right? They don't have an out, right? Their whole life is a resistance. For us, we're having to look for resistance, right, to better ourselves. For them, their whole life is that, right? So it's like, okay, how do we go through, So then how do you be able to become a better version of yourself? And you got to find those elements, and that's such an easy way to do it, right? Is to be consistent and work out and eat healthier. Of course, who wouldn't want to choose a cheesecake over a salad? Anyone who tells you otherwise is lying.
So speaking of food, we all love our food, especially our ethnic foods. People are really tied to them. They've eaten them since since they were little kids. And then even junk food. Some people really love their fast food and junk food, and especially those foods are hyper palatable. Mm-hmm. And that just hardwires people to just continue reaching out for some of those foods. So how should people manage their relationship with food?
Well, I think that's one thing that you just said in there is the palatability of food, right? But certain foods are just very but that's the whole point of those desserts and those, right? It's heavily processed, right? It sends off, endorphins
But even the ethnic foods, which are homemade, but you've cooked them all your life and you just love them, you just can't let go of that.
And so one thing I'll say is, one thing that irks me is that when people come up with like healthy versions of like biryani or like nahari, and I'm like, listen, they're supposed to be unhealthy, leave them alone, right? But those foods were never meant to be an everyday thing. Yeah. Right? Like culturally, they were celebratory food.
That's right.
We've just turned it because of how well off we are in the West, right? It just goes to show, remember I was talking about that royalty aspect of our lives, right? Just goes to show that was never supposed to be something that we were supposed to be eating every day anyways. It was supposed to be a celebratory thing. It was supposed to be a once in a while thing, right? So if we go back to that element of it, like I love biryani, it's not supposed to be healthy. Enjoy it when you have it, right? I would say it's bad for bad for your health, but good for the soul, right?
But sometimes I want to push back. Biryani can be healthy if it's made in the right way.
No, it will say it won't taste good at all. No, it's not the same thing. It won't not. No, that's not true at all. Trust me, I've gone through every single version.
For example, some of the things like meat is good for you anyway.
Yeah.
So increase the meat. Reduce the rice ratio.
No, because one thing you don't realize is biryani has oil in it. A tremendous amount of oil has to go into that.
So I was gonna say, for that,
so you're
olive
having
oil.
No. But thing is, like, you're not putting a little bit of ghee. The amount of ghee you would have to put, the calories are gonna shoot up like crazy. There's a reason why I've had biryani and wanted to go work out. I'm like, oh my god, and you like just burping, like heartburn. I'm like, this is not rice and chicken. This is not the same thing. It goes back to what we were originally talking about when the client's like, just have rice and chicken. Right. It's not the same thing. Same thing in the nahari. I'm like, you need to have that layer of oil, or otherwise it's not the same thing. Even though it's technically just meat. I'm like, yes, you're getting your protein intake, but everything else, and then the amount of bread that you have to go through to be able to soak in, all the curry and everything. I'm like, you're not gonna just take one little, all right, this is 30 grams. You're going through like 80, 90, 100 grams within one sitting. And then the time it takes. And the thing is, because of how high fat, and that's one thing I don't think people understand. It's not just our carbohydrates. Our food is very high in fat and carbs. It's high in both because the oil is all fat, right? And then say we put ghee, which is just really high in fat, right? Again, like people talk about ghee being healthy. Yes, in the right quantity. That's right. Just like carbohydrates, in the right quantity, it is good for you, right? We surpass it by a mile.
Would you say a lot of our cooking, uses a lot of seed oils, corn oil, canola oil, whatever it is.
But that's a new thing.
Does that make any difference if somebody switched out oils to, let's say they want to use olive oil instead of canola oil? And they may just make that switch, and olive oil is known to be far better than some of these seed oils. Is that a worthwhile switch from what?
Yes
you've
and
seen?
no. So it could have an effect on your health overall. It won't have an effect on your weight loss or anything, because the amount that you're taking. So for example, you just got to look at, okay, per serving, how many calories is it?
Yeah.
Right. Like there's research of a guy just eating Oreos all day and he still lost weight because he was below his calories. Right. Like you can eat unhealthy, right? Or you can gain weight by eating too much healthy foods as well. Like nuts.
That's right.
Nuts are really healthy for you.
Yeah.
But a significant amount, like it's the amount of people that we have tell us like, oh no, I'm just having some nuts. And you go through how many nuts they were having. Nuts are very dense in calories,
Yeah.
right? So a very small amount, right? I think it's like maybe like 8 to 10 per serving you should be having, and no one actually
Like
eats that.
cashews.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And cashews, especially, you can easily devour like a whole bunch of them, right? And that's the one thing is they don't appreciate that even that which is healthy can very easily add up in calories, right? Like there's nothing wrong with butter, there's nothing wrong with ghee, but if you add up and add like a ridiculous amount, again, right? Same thing with like red meat. It always gets a bad rap from certain parts of the community, but red meat isn't bad for you. But again, if you're adding in a whole bunch of butter and ghee to when you're barbecuing it, or say you're going through your cooking process, and then you're adding a whole bunch of carbohydrates beside it, you have something that's going to be higher in fat. You also have your carbohydrates that are going to be that's going to spike. So it's a combination of everything else that you're providing along with it, right?
Yeah.
So it's like it's not just one little thing. Right.
And then you drink a Coke with it. And you just added like 25 grams, 30, 50 grams. I don't know how much sugar in there.
And everything else that's wrong with that as well. On top of that, right? That's just those calories, but everything else from a health aspect, right? Like those drinks absolutely destroy your gut.
Oh yeah.
Right. Like it's like they're cleaners. So right. They just absolutely destroy your gut. Right. So it's one thing, again, a one-off. Right. I never tell anybody don't ever have anything. Right, because that's just not realistic, right? It's not practical, and it's just we don't need to live a life where we can never have any. Like I love desserts, I love cheesecake and so forth, but there's a time and place for it, right? There is a time and place for having certain things, right? Like I go to family's house if they have, I'm like, all right, like for dessert specifically, I would say be a dessert snob. Because I'm like, if you're going to be taking in those calories, it better be good.
Yeah, that's
right? I'm like,
yeah.
There's certain families' house, I know I'm eating everything, because that they give certain like aunts or like cousins, they're like amazing cooks, and everything they're going to be making. Or you have like a specific cousin, she's a really good dessert, really good at desserts. You're like, all right, she's making it. I don't care what it is, I'm eating it, because you always know it's really good. That's different. But if you show up to everywhere and they're like, what do they have? They have kheer. Like, oh, okay, like basic. Nothing to it. It just, and I'm like, all right, just fill up a bowl. Like, why? You're just doing it just because, right? And it's just adding all these extra calories for no reason. You didn't even enjoy it, right? The worst thing to do is like, at least if you could turn around and be like, oh, that was pretty good though. I feel guilty about it, but it was pretty good.
How do you, like, I always tell people like one of the biggest things you can do is like if you're eating, let's say biryani, and you're eating all of these foods that you love, just cut the dessert out. Like it's a very easy switch to make, because at the end of the meal, you're kind of full anyway, so you're not.
Yeah.
And if you just make that cut.
One thing I've realized over the years is that one of the biggest reasons why a lot of people like to add why desserts is so big in our community after we eat is because of how spicy our food is as well, right? That you almost need, and same thing with Coke or any pop that we drink, is because you need to almost like feel like you're pushing everything down, it feels like, right? But like, mind you, like I love spicy, like all my food has to be extra spicy. Like I'm big on that, right? But again, it just, but I won't always have something sweet afterwards, but that just takes time to be able to go through that, right? And to be able to evolve to a point where you can be okay with not having it. But if you really need to, have a date if you want, or have some fruits if you want, right? They'll still add, they're not going to be ridiculous in calories, right? But mind you, again, same thing. If it's once a week, you're meeting your family, then it's fine. Enjoy yourself. One meal is not going to destroy your entire weeks, right? You're not losing all your results because of one meal. Right?
Not one day, one meal.
One meal, not one day, one meal. That's really important, right? And then leading up to it is really easy too, right? So for example, skip breakfast that day. Like for example, if every Saturday we have like a family gathering, for example, right? Saturday, skip your breakfast, right? If you do have anything, stick to protein and veggies, right? So make a salad and have some, I don't know, cook some chicken or steak or whatever. Have that on the side, and then go for a run or do a workout, do something active, right? And then go to their house, and then that way you're already significantly below your caloric intake for the day anyways now, so you're good, right, going into it.
So while maintaining our ethnic foods and a lot of the foods that we love, and allowing people to eat that or continue eating that, how can they make smarter dietary choices?
Sorry, say it again.
While you maintain your ethnic foods. So you have your favorite ethnic foods. People like eating their daily rotis and curries, or maybe various Arabic cuisines, or if you're wherever you're from, and you love your ethnic food, and certain ethnic foods might not be necessarily the best for your health. How can you still make smarter dietary choices while maintaining that?
So it depends. You'll be shocked. The vast majority of certain choices, I think people already know, right? Like, for example, rice you can have, bread you can have, right? Just your quantity that you should be having, right? Like, for example, if someone has like, in like India, Pakistan, we call paratha, right? One is like around 80, 90 grams of carbohydrates. That's a lot of carbohydrates for an average person, right? So you cut that in half. But who can eat half a paratha, realistically? That's not like, because I can't do that. I need the whole thing, right?
That's right.
Or let alone one, right? So then the thing is, okay, is there a better substitution for me to be able to have, right? And there are other substitutions you can go for, bread that isn't as high in carbohydrates and so forth, right? And then same thing with anything else that you're for same thing with rice and so forth, right? For example, when you go out to eat, the vast majority of, like, say if you go to like Afghan, or if you go like Arab, like shawarma type joints, as amazing as they are, a lot of times in their rice they put sugar. They'll put like molasses, or they'll put sugar. Molasses, the same thing, right? So you're not just having rice now, right? So people are like, well, I'll just have a small amount of rice, and people don't know that, right? A lot of people don't realize that, right? And so a friend of mine didn't believe me, so I asked. I'm like, you guys put? So I asked at the restaurant that we're, I'm like, you guys put sugar in your? So they're like, yeah, we just put a little bit. I'm like, what? That's not a measuring thing, right? It's like a little bit. It's like when like Desi aunties say like, I just put a little bit of oil. It's like the whole thing's being emptied, right? It's like that's not a measuring thing, right?
That's right.
So that's the one thing. It's like understanding those elements that plays a part, and then it's just accepting that there are certain things that you'll have to add alternates to.
Are there certain things that you just cut out completely? Certain junk food or certain food groups?
Well, junk food, yeah, right. Not food groups necessarily, but junk food as a whole, not cut out altogether. But again, if you want to have it,
like
certain
by cutting
times,
out, I mean like, okay, fried stuff. Just stop on that.
If it's that one meal
or whatever.
If it's that one meal, right? If on Saturday night, for example, we're just using that as an example. Saturday night, you get into the family, and you're like, I want to have some fried chicken. All right, that's your one meal. You can do that. Right. That one meal, you can have pizza, you can have wings, you can have burger. That one meal will not destroy your entire weeks. And if you've been consistent for 2-3 months consistently, like for example, myself, we had some family come over that stayed over at our place, right? Just this past week. It was not a healthy week for me. I've been doing this for so many years. I've been doing this for such a long time that even if I have a bad week, it's not that big a deal for me. I can very easily go right back to what I was within a snap of a finger. It takes me a few days and I'm back to it. But that's just consistently year after year of being consistent, right? That when those moments, or if I go to a wedding, I'm like, all right, I can go to back-to-back weddings and be like, yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, I know it's been 2 back-to-back unhealthy days. I feel really sluggish. The biggest thing is, it's not about cutting everything out. It's about making sure that you're being consistent on eating healthy. And as you start being consistent on eating healthy and being active, and you have those days where you have like consecutive days, you start to feel disgusting.
Yes,
right?
That's right.
It's 100%. When you don't feel disgusting.
100%.
Is that that's the biggest thing. That's the biggest marker, because that makes you want to like, bro, I need to go eat healthier. I can't do this. I need to eat cleaner, right? Because you start to notice a difference in your energy, and then you start to realize you have this almost like aha moment. You're like, oh, this is how it always was. This is how I used to always feel.
That's right.
Is this why I needed like Tylenol all the time? Because my headache was hurting. I had a headache. Like my head was hurting all the time, or like I was just always sluggish, or I need to take like multiple naps, or I just need to like have like a coffee stuck to my hand at all times. I'm like, this is why. That's right. But that's the thing, right? People don't put those 2 and 2 together. So the biggest thing is, don't worry about cutting everything out. Worry about consistency. Worry about being like eating healthier throughout the week. Worry about working out and being physically active. And as you do that consistently over a period of time, and then when those occasions come up and you're like, oh man, I feel disgusting, that's when you've got to the other side of that. That's right. And then you start to be like, okay, I got to get back to that.
So speaking of healthy, what do you eat in a typical day?
Actually right now I'm on I have my like ups and downs, in the sense where I'll have like 5-6 months where I'm like, I want to eat certain things. Like I'll have like oatmeal and like protein. Like that's what I want to have for like 5-6 months. I just feel like having. Then I'll go through like egg whites and 2 eggs and some like toast. I'm like, that's what I feel like having with some veggies and stuff. Right now I'm on a cottage cheese. So I'll have like about a cup of cottage cheese. I'll have 2 whole eggs on the side. And then I'll have cranberries with 2 slices of bread.
So this is like your breakfast, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So that gets me to about 40 to 50 grams of carbohydrates, gets me to about 60 grams of protein. And then I'll have the cranberries in there as well. I'll kind of put the cranberries into sorry, not cranberries, sorry, cherries. Sorry, cherries.
Cherries, okay, yeah.
I'll put the cherries into the cottage cheese and stuff, and then and just black coffee, and then right now that's just been my. I don't know why. I end up going through like, let me just try something different. And then I just
how about for like, do you do 3 meals or 2 meals?
3 meals generally, and I'll have a snack depending on how my energy.
So what do you do for lunch?
So lunch, dinner, lunch and dinner is usually the same, similar, right? So it'll be some form of protein. So depending on my wife, she's the one obviously that does most of the cooking. I'll do most of the barbecuing and stuff like that. I'll do some of the proteins, but she does most of the stuff. It'll be simple stuff like I'll have rice at least once a day, if not twice. But it'll usually be either rice or bread. I like my rice. I like having rice multiple times in a day. Feel so much better off it. And then I'll have so then it depends on if she's making, I don't know, the other day she made like a coconut chicken curry, which is absolutely amazing. It's actually in our book as well.
I think my wife has your book.
Yes.
Yeah,
it's in there, right? Or so do something like that, and then evening something similar. I like having leftovers. I have no problem having the same meal twice in a day, or 2-3 times a thing. I have no problem with that. So it'll be stuff. So but thing is, it'll be rice, some sort of veggies of some sort, and then it'll be like a rice with meat of something. Right? So it'll be fish or chicken. It'll kind of alternate throughout the week. It won't be anything that's like the same thing week in, week out, but it'll kind of alternate from there. The one thing that's big for us is the flavor profile, right? So I'll always have more of the traditional flavor profile for the majority of foods. There's certain ones that won't, obviously, because if you want like a more Western tradition or and so forth, but it has to be spicy, right? So if it's not spicy, then I have a cupboard full of hot sauces. And I actually started making my own hot sauces and stuff too. So because the thing is like there's no calories.
I have a super spicy Scotch bonnet pepper sauce upstairs.
Nice.
I'll show it to you.
Okay, nice. Because the thing is, there are no calories, right? So you can go nuts on those, right? Like because it's just peppers, right? It's
but
peppers.
I think what can happen is if it can make you eat more. Some of these things.
Sometimes, but again, make your plate and don't add anything else to it.
That's
you can't add more.
That's true.
Yeah.
Limit yourself first.
Exactly.
That makes sense. So counting macros, so carbohydrates, fats, and proteins as kind of the main macros. How do you count them? What do you suggest in terms of ratios for that, for kind of like a healthy diet?
So that depends. That depends on person to person, right? It depends on I think for protein, for example, the medical thing is like 0.8 gram per body weight, right? For me, I'm always at a pound a pound. So for example, right now I'm at about 200 pounds. So for me, it's about hitting 200 grams. I'm on my way down to about 190 because I've been in that 200 to 210 range for probably about 2 years now, right? I felt great, felt stronger, but I'm noticing, but for me, I just want to, I haven't been down to 190 in a long time. So I'm like, all right, let me just get down to 190, but I'll probably still keep it at I'll probably keep my protein intake around 195 to 200, but we won't do that with members, right? It's different because the thing is the vast majority of members coming to us, they're not training the way I do.
That's more for muscle gain. But
it's
for
not even just muscle, but even
person.
for just maintaining at the level that I'm doing it at, right? Because again, I'm still working out a lot, right? And I play a lot of sports as well, right? So I'm significantly more active than the average person, right? So what I will be doing, I won't be recommending to members who are coming in, they're like, listen, I just want to lose my gut. I want to have more energy for my kids, right? So for them, it's 0.8, that which is more than sufficient.
So 0.8 grams per pound of body weight,
exactly,
or goal body weight.
So body weight at that
Current
point,
body weight.
and then because the protein isn't the issue, the issue is their carbohydrates and their fat. Right. So fat, then you can start bringing that down. But again, it depends. It depends on a person to person basis. Right. So then when you present your weight, you'd present what your physical everything else, your goals and so forth. Then my wife, she'll sit down and go over the nutrition aspect and understanding, okay, wait, this is what your aspect has to, or this is what the level that you have to be at. Right. But it depends on the person. Right. Because it's going to go on person to person basis to make sure that it's customized to them. Right. Yeah. So that way they can follow it. Right. So the one thing we always do is we'll have different macro, but we don't actually provide macros to the person. Instead, we want you to follow a meal plan. We'll have full recipes, full guidelines, a grocery list and everything. Because And so you start to learn and understand how you're supposed to be eating. Because like when people get so fixated on numbers, it gets a lot harder and it's not as enjoyable to be able to go about
That's
your
right.
day, right? Unless they really want to learn that stuff, then that's different, right? And some members do, but the vast majority is like, man, just give me an idea of what I can eat and how I can go about it. And that in itself creates a huge change, right? So even with us, like when we're making plans for like spouses and stuff, or sorry, for like husband and wives or kids in the house, we don't change the recipe. Right, so we don't change the meals; we'll change the portions, right? So that will change significantly,
That
right?
makes sense.
Because the thing is, you don't want to have to cook twice.
That's right. Yeah.
And generally, people eat the same at home, right? It's rare where you're having like, okay, I can't eat this, I can't eat the way they eat, right? Unless you have some sort of like allergic thing. But even then, the person just adapts to what the person's circumstances, right? So we just want to make sure it's like similar to that as well.
What do you say about intermittent fasting? People are following a bunch of different diets. So intermittent fasting has come out as something that's very powerful. Well, we know about fasting anyway from like Ramadan and other kind of religious fasts, but intermittent fasting where you're fasting for at least 16 hours, maybe 18, maybe 20, 22 hours. Yeah. That's kind of going up there, but maybe 16 to 18 hours. Yeah. And then you're going down to maybe 2 meals a day. So that eating window is reduced 6 hours, 8 hours, and you just eat 2 meals in that day. Is that something you see as beneficial?
So from a health side, intermittent fasting is great. It has a lot of benefits to it, right? And we all see that in Ramadan, but we also see another thing in Ramadan, that Muslims have done all the research in the world to prove that you can fast for 30 days for 16 hours straight and still gain weight. Okay, we've done all the research. So anytime someone comes up and I'm like, listen, we're the experts in fasting. All right, Muslims fast. We fast for 30. Yeah, we fast for 30 days. And it's funny because I've had these conversations where I've listened to people talk about this and like that are from the West that aren't Muslim. They're just like trendy. It's like, oh, I'm doing IF, and I'm like, no, you're not. It's like you don't know what fasting is. All right, let's do it daytime. You're fasting at nighttime. First off, like that's not fasting. Then we fast every day because breakfast, we're breaking fast, right? Well, that's what we're doing, right? I'm like, you guys aren't fasting. First off, right? Like fast in a day. Then you're talking fasting, right? Or you're just not eating breakfast, you're just eating lunch. Like, that's not really fasting, right? But the thing is, like, we're fasting in the daytime. You know, that's
people, let's say you ate dinner at like 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. and then you don't eat anything all the way until like 3.
Yeah, but 8 hours, at least 8 hours of that you're sleeping. Yeah. Right? Like for us, we're functioning throughout the day. Like when we wake up for Fajr, we might go to sleep for a few hours, like 2 hours, 3 hours at most, right? Maybe, or some people will, right? But then you're up the rest of the day. On the weekend, you might sleep in, but the rest of the day, you're up. You're up until whenever Fajr is, whenever Maghrib is, right? It's sunset, right? So you're up for the vast majority, probably, say if your fast is 12 hours, or say it's 10 hours, you're up for probably 90% of it. Right, but for most people who are intermittent fasting, they're asleep for probably 75%.
But they started earlier.
Yeah, So I'm like, that's fine, no problem, right? You're sleeping for most of it, right? That's not even the issue. You're still going to see health benefits, no problem. What you eat during that eating window still matters,
of course,
right? And like I said, Muslims have proven that, right? Like we surpass our daily calories by a mile.
It's great that you said that because I had somebody who asked me who wanted to do intermittent fasting. They were like, can I just eat anything I want then? Once I've done my fast, I was like, of course not. That's not gonna.
Right? Yeah. Otherwise, that's what we'd just be like. All right, listen. You want to have fried chicken tonight? Yeah. Just give me 8 hours of fasting or 10 hours of fasting. You can have all fried chicken, and I'll bring you some pizza along with it. No, but that's just not the case, right? Right? And the thing is, we've proven that, right? That you can't do that, right? So that's the one thing. It's like regardless of what you choose, teaching yourself to say no is always going to be of the utmost importance, right? And understanding the importance of being able to fight your nafs, right? Because that's all it is, right? When we're going towards these more palatable foods and certain things, right? You're fighting your desires, right? You're fighting your nafs to be able to say no, right? So a lot of times it's just regardless of what you choose. And intermittent fast is great. Like we have members, we have some who do it, some don't, right? And a lot of times it's based on preference of, some people just don't like eating breakfast, right? They cannot stand it. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, right? So again, it's customized to the person, right? So you'll have, like, I don't want to eat in the morning. No problem. You don't have to eat in the morning, right? How's your energy low? I feel great. Okay, awesome. Then you sign. But if someone's like, I don't feel like eating in the morning. We're like, how do you feel in the morning? I feel sluggish. I feel tired. Have you tried eating? It's like, I just don't have time. So it's not that you don't want to eat, you just don't have the time to eat. That's right. So why don't you have the time to eat? What time are you going to sleep? I'm usually in bed like at 2 a.m. What are you doing till 2? I don't know, I'm just watching something. Okay, there. Go to sleep earlier. So if you go to bed by 11:30, wake up, how'd you feel? Oh, I felt amazing. Did you have a meal? It's like, yeah, I felt great. Awesome. There you go. Right. So you function off, or like me, I function significantly better off breakfast. Like I'm okay if I miss a lunch or even like, a dinner, but like breakfast, I'm like in the morning, I like to start my day off with a meal. I'm like, I always feel so much better. Right. So, but again, it changes person to person.
It does. Yeah.
Right.
What do you say about certain kind of diets? So some people are vegan, vegetarian, animal-based or carnivore, and there's also other diets like paleo diet or
And
Mediterranean diet and all these other diets. So there's dietary choices and then specific diets. So are there some of those that are bad, good, whatever?
Like I said, it's the same thing that I have, right? If you really want to do something, go nuts. There's health benefits to all of them to some degree, and if someone wants to do it, no problem, go for it. But to think that it's the all end all, you're just wrong. That's just being blunt. To think that you can't ever have carbohydrates, or that you can't ever eat meat, or if you can't ever eat vegetables or fruits, you're just wrong. First off, we think about it Islamically, right? Like for us, like we're getting our teachings, from the Prophet ﷺ, and he ate meat. He had carbohydrates in his diet. He had vegetables in his diet. He had fruits in his diet, right? He did not tell us to cut out any of that stuff. He told us don't indulge, right?
That's right.
Don't indulge,
yeah.
Right? So eat, just don't indulge. But don't think that everything, and then people are like, but the nutrients aren't the same and blah, and those other stuff like this. First off, what nutrients, what vitamins and stuff are you getting from meat? Or vice versa, right? You're not going to get sufficient protein from vegetables. They're like, if you're a vegan, it's very, very difficult for you to be able to keep it. Like, for example, there's that really annoying mockumentary, I call it, not even a documentary, that came on Netflix, Game Changer.
Yeah.
Right? Absolute nonsense, right? And it's been debunked and it's been absolutely torn apart within the health world. Just because for its, they talked about different athletes, right? I'm like, fine. I think they mentioned like 6 different athletes. Okay, cool, not a problem. Do you know the millions that we can name that all eat meat that dominate significantly more than every single one of those athletes they mentioned?
That's right.
Right? Like they mentioned Nate Diaz, for example, right? He is like, he's a vegetarian. But the part they missed out, he's not a vegetarian when he's in fight camp. So when he's preparing for a fight, he adds fish to his diet to make sure he has the strength to keep doing what he needs to do.
That's crazy.
Right? So I'm like, wait, you guys missed the most important part. He said he eats fish a significant amount during fight camp. Like, why didn't you guys mention that part? Right? And then they're going on about all these different athletes that are like, I'm like, and then they're talking about, I think there's something about like the world's a powerlifter or something like that. I'm like, the world's strongest man. One of them, his name is Hopper. He's Canadian actually, from Barrie. I'm like, he eats meat. He's like all these, like you look at what's his name, Thor Borgnson, or whatever.
I'm
like, mountain. I'm like, literally he eats mountains of animals. No, I'm like, again, nothing against being a vegan or vegetarian. If you want to do that, okay, fine, okay, all the power to you. But to turn around and look down at someone else as if they're not doing something right, and that's the problem, right? We go into like these tribes. Right, almost cults, right? Because I have some friends who are like carnivore, or that went to a carnivore route, and exactly the same thing. I'm like, first off, I'm like, you're following these guys on social media that flip flop, bake it back and forth. Like you have one, I don't want to mention his name, but you had one individual who was like, he was hardcore no carbs, then he switched to, okay, carbs are bad, but then he started off a vegetarian. He started as hardcore vegetarian. Then he said, actually no, vegetables are bad with no carbs. Then he's like, well, wait, we can have meat. And he's written books on all of these things. Then because that's the direction the trend was going. And then he cut out all vegetables and he's like, no carbs, just carnivore. Now, recently he came out and he's like, wait, never mind. You can have certain carbs. You can have fruits and honey. It's
Paul Saladino?
Right? It's like, one thing is, there's nothing wrong with changing your opinion, right? And be like, listen, I learned more. I understood more now. That's fine. The part that irks me about a lot of these guys out there is that they start to vilify those that are against their argument, right? Yeah. So say I'm wrong. Okay, fine. Yeah. There is one way, no problem. But I'm not vilifying you doing anything else. I'm telling you, there's a good chance I might not know.
Specifically, it has changed that because he got a lot of flack for it. Because he started dissing all vegetables, basically.
He made a lot of money doing it, too.
He did, and then he got called out quite a bit because a lot of people are thriving. But now what he says is, if you're thriving eating X, Y, Z vegetable, keep doing it. for me, it doesn't work.
But that took him after he made,
yes, exactly,
right. But that's what I mean. It's one thing if right off the bat he's like, listen, I'm vegetarian. You guys can do if you took that approach right off the beginning, no problem.
Yeah.
Right. For me, that credibility is not just because it's like, okay, wait, where was that all to begin with? Right? Why like? But that's for us. It just comes down to our thing, right? Having the humbleness, right? I by no means am saying that I know everything and the all end all or anything, right? But I'm like, I'm okay with learning and understanding what I don't know, right? I don't know what I don't know, right? It is what it is.
Some of them are just entertainment, like Liver King.
Oh yeah,
just pure entertainment.
But the funniest was people were
tenets.
surprised that he's not. I'm like, really? Like, I'm like. And
you can't look like that. He was just dieting. There's no.
And the thing
way
is, like, okay, fine. Say you can look like that, but I'm like, his workouts were horrible. Everything was just like none of this makes any sense, right? It was just everything as a whole, right? Like even when you look at steroids, it's just so funny because like, you know, people like assume even with steroids that you'll take it and you'll just automatically gain all this muscle and so forth too. Like there's a huge epidemic with even with like steroids and stuff, especially within those who are younger, thinking that they can just take stuff and just get jacked. Don't realize, like you see people all the time now, especially in gyms, most average body, not against that, right? But like in the sense where it's like a person who works out, right? Regular looking person who works out, you know, decent arms, you know, chest, shoulders, you know, so forth. Nothing like Instagram worthy in that sense, right? But like, all right, you look like you work out. And if you find out later it's like % steroids, I'm like, for that?
Are you serious?
All the time. Yeah, there's so many.
So the amount of people that are taking it is more than
it's a multi-billion-dollar
expect.
industry.
Yeah.
You're not seeing that many people walking around that are absolutely shredded.
Because I see people at the gym sometimes, and they're like young too. Some of them will be young, like in their 20s, and they're like absolutely jacked. I'm like, there's no way this guy got like
so
that.
One thing I'll
fast.
say is genetics is a thing.
It is a thing,
right?
Yeah.
I remember I had one client come in once when I was working at the commercial gym, and it was so interesting because like this guy comes in and he's like, bro, I've never worked out in my life. I'm like, all right, no problem. He's like, I'm here alone. You know, I just came here a few years ago and I've never worked out a day in my life. I'm like, all right, not a problem. What do you do? He's like, I work. He's like, he has some factory job, lifting boxes, nothing heavy or anything like that. It's fairly active, but nothing too crazy. And he's like, I'm like, all right, let's go. Everything I put him through, this thing was the easiest thing in the world. I'm like, bro, there's no way that you've never done anything. He's like, I swear to you, I've never done anything. And just, you can tell he was a genetic freak. Like, I'm like, all right, let's go on the treadmill. He had boots on. And this guy, 20, 30 minutes, I come back. I'm like, bro, you're still running? And at a fast pace with a high incline. I'm like, yo, I'm like, listen, you need to like take this thing seriously. Like, you could really do something in this, right? And but that's the thing. Some are just genetically gifted, right? So again, I don't want to accuse anyone either, right? So a lot of them, like some genetically gifted. But yeah, it's huge. Like from SARMs to peptides to steroids to all this stuff. And what people don't understand is like, you have to know how to work out, right? You can take all the steroids in the world. You might put on some muscle, but you have to know how to work out. You have to know how to eat. The vast majority of people don't know the first two things of that.
Yeah.
But then you have to know how to take steroids as well.
For sure.
Right? There's a whole off-cycle part to it. There's all these supplements that you have to take in order for you to manage like your kidney and all this other stuff. You know, like when people ask us, like, you ever thought about it? I'm like, bro, you understand the headache that it is? I'm like, I got 3 kids. I'm like, I got enough to stress about.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, I don't want to have to worry about, how do I take all those supplements to make sure my kidneys don't shut off? I'm like, oh, there's a potential chance even if I do take this, I'm like, it can cut some time off my life. I'm like, so I can have, slightly less strength and slightly less physique or any of that stuff, but still have a better chance of living longer. I'm like, I'm good. I'm like, what is the purpose of it? Like, what am I trying to obtain? Who am I trying to impress? Like, I'm already married. I've done that part.
So I wanted to ask about muscle growth specifically a little bit as we come towards the end is a lot of guys are interested in gaining muscle mass, hypertrophy. So what are some of the how should one get started? How can we start putting on some muscle mass?
So the 2 ways that you gain muscle is strength training, so resistance. Right. Mm-hmm. And then the second, well, not that 1 and 2, but the second thing is protein intake, right? Sufficient protein intake. So those are 2 ways. Any one of those 2 things missing, you're going to be thinking, right? Making sure that you're adding sufficient volume plays a factor as well. So regardless of how you want to split up your workouts, right? So if you want to follow bodybuilding, if that's your goal, if you want to follow the bro splits that you want to do, no problem. If you want to do, I prefer upper lower. If you say if you're going 4 times, I'm like, hey, upper lower, because you're hitting multiple muscle groups multiple times in a week, and same thing with your lower body as well. And it's better, especially for athletes as well, especially if you're playing like sports
push-pull
and stuff.
I go towards push-pull. Is that
Push-pull legs, yeah, that's fine too, right? But adding in some elements of legs on your pull days, especially as well, right? So you're gonna that's fine too, right? But again, if you're only going 3 times in a week, I would. So if you're going 3 times a week, I prefer full body workouts, right? Go full body, because then you're hitting multiple muscle groups 3 times in a week. You know, if you're doing 4, then you could do 2 and 2, right? And then as you get better, the one thing is like you'll have arguments towards getting to failure. My only thing is, once you've been doing it for a certain amount of time and your form is at point, then try to get to failure, just from a safety aspect, right? Because if you don't have the form to be able to lock into certain positions, and you know, a higher chance of hurting yourself, right? So increasing your volume. And the one thing to remember when it comes to building muscle or getting stronger, your mind will always stop before your body does. Right, so your body will tell you to quit before your body can. And a great way to know if you're actually leaving some in the reserve or kind of holding yourself back is record yourself, right? Have a friend do it, or prop your phone up and just be like, all right, let me see, you know, this is a heavier lift. Or if you're squatting, be like, all right, you know, it's 225 on there, you know, say, can I do it? And mentally you'd be like, oh man, that was hard. You look back on the phone, on your camera, and you're like, yeah, that was easy. I just like got up there, right? But mentally, so that's the one thing I always remember is like, you do have to push yourself, right? You do have to make sure you're adding enough volume throughout the week to allow yourself to be able to. And the recovery plays a huge part. Sleep, don't ever neglect sleep, and understanding the importance of it. You know, put your phones away at least an hour before to allow yourself to kind of, you know, your body to start signaling that it's time for bed, and get sufficient sleep. Recovery plays a huge part. You don't grow muscle while you work out. Right, you're growing muscle as you recover. Right. So what are you doing during the recovery time? Right. So if you're doing anything that's going to be, so if your sleep isn't sufficient, your muscle growth will play a factor. Right. Your performance as a whole will play a factor. Will be hit. Right. So that all plays.
For recovery, so should you not be working out every day? Some people go to the gym like pretty much every day.
They can. So like.
Take that recovery day so you can build muscle, or else what happens?
So you can do like an active recovery too, right? So you're still, you know, if you go to the gym, if you just want to jump on the bike and you want to do some core work, some light stuff, just want to get some movement in. There's nothing wrong with that either. You don't have to just sit. No, you always want to do something every day. Never just sit and do nothing, right? So even if it's something as like, I'm just going to go for a 30-minute walk, right? Something as simple as that, right? You always want to have something that you're doing, right? So that's actually better for recovery. Doing steady state cardio is great for recovery. So even if it's like a stationary bike, or if you go for a bike ride, or if you go for a walk, you want that blood circulation. You ever sit in a car for like an hour, and then you get out of the car and you're like, oh, everything just feels tight, right? Even though you're healthy and you're functioning well and you don't have any back issues or leg issues, you don't have anything. But if you go for a long drive, right, like 2, 3, 4 hours, you get out of the car and you're just like, oh, everything's just really tight, because your body's just been sitting in. And so that's the one thing, you don't want to just sit around. You want to get some blood circulation. You want to move your body, right? You'll recover a lot faster as well.
I've heard from people that doing cardio will kill your gains.
No.
Is that true?
No.
Because I've heard.
So the only time, so it depends on what you, like if you're looking to get it, to become a bodybuilder standing on a bodybuilding stage, and every single degree of muscle counts, every single inch, that's different, right? Then yes, don't run a few miles. That's completely different. But if you're looking at putting on like a decently amount size of muscle, and you still want to be able to move and run and so forth, look at rugby players, look at football players. You're telling me these guys don't do cardio, right? You look at even sprinters. Sprinters are a perfect example. There's actually a documentary that just came out on sprinters right now on Netflix. I just started watching the first episode. It seems amazing. These guys are jacked, right? I'm like, they're bigger than the average person. Like even if you look at football players or rugby players or like any one of these sports, right? Like these guys are huge. Like even soccer players, they don't look big, but they're still pretty shredded. I'm like, you're telling me they don't look at their legs. Their legs are massive, right? Soccer players, right? Same thing with hockey players. Like they're big guys, right? I'm like, so that's the problem is the vast majority of people get their information from bodybuilding. And that's the huge issue. That's is that right. The vast majority of people aren't looking to become bodybuilders, but that's what because it's easy, right? Understanding how to be able to prepare yourself to do plyometrics is hard because people don't understand how to prep themselves into plyometrics or how to be able to do an upper lower and being able to go through that. But everybody understands how to do a bicep curl. Everybody understands how to do a bench press. Everybody understands how to do a dumbbell press, right? Because it's so much easier, right? So that's the one thing. It's like, you know, if you look at even if you look at CrossFit athletes, right? They look better than some bodybuilders do, right? And they're just absolutely jacked.
That's right.
Right. But yet they're doing ridiculous amount of cardio, right? So your food intake matters, right? So your protein intake matters. And in their case, carbohydrates plays a huge part, obviously, as well. Recovery plays a huge factor, right? So again, if you're looking to stand on stage, cut it down a little bit. But if you're not looking to stand on the stage, no, go for
What
both.
do you say about lean bulking versus, you know, or dirty bulking? People go through like a cutting and bulking phase.
So again, that's like a bodybuilding thing, right? The dirty bulk. Mind you, I think that's one thing is good to hear that people are starting to understand not to do the dirty bulking thing, just because it's just unhealthy. Yeah. There's nothing health related to it, right? There's nothing good about that.
Just
right?
maximizing growth.
You look disgusting too. You can't move. You're tired. You're sluggish. Like, you know, you stink up the washroom significantly more. Everything is just disgusting about it. All right.
So is there a way to gain muscle on like a lean diet, or, you know, on,
you
on
can
kind of like a cutting
but
phase?
You don't have to go to an extreme, right? So you're still increasing your calories, and you might put on a little bit of body fat. That's okay, but it's not to a point where it's like you look overweight, right? Like you've seen those guys, you're just like, this guy's big, right? But it's like he doesn't necessarily have the cuts or anything, but he's like, yeah, he's a big boy, right? It's like that. You don't have to go down that route, but you increase your calories, increase your carbohydrates and your protein and so forth. But just don't take it to a point. Don't think that you need to have like an ice cream milkshake every night because you're like, all right, I just got to get these calories in to put on size.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
How do you get your abs to show? So people low
body fat. And so low body fat and working on your abs as well, right? So adding resistance to your abs, right? With weights plays a huge factor as well, right? So doing crunches with weights. So like if you do a cable, right? Leg raises are great for like lower abs as well. But adding, so doing core work, right? To be able to build the muscle, because it's a muscle no different than any other part of the body. Yeah. So adding that plays a factor, right? And then getting low enough. And for some people, it's genetics. It takes a lot longer. You'll have some people just walk into the gym, and 4 or 5 months in, they're just like, look at me. Unfortunately, it is what it is, right? They can thank their parents, and that's it.
Is there a certain like body fat percentage range?
Depends on the person too. Depends on 10, the size,
12,
right?
15.
It's usually so single digits, obviously, right? But even some can see within the teens as well, like low teens as well, right? And then you'll have the freaks who can see a little bit higher. But generally speaking, within the low teens is generally a good stepping stone towards that. Yeah. But generally, within like you'll start to see mid to low teens. You'll start to see some, depending, again, genetics plays a factor, because some just take a lot longer in their like lower back and their gut just takes a little bit longer.
So I guess a couple of last questions is, how do you avoid plateaus? Like once you start gaining muscle, I know there's like newbie gains when you first start out, first year, 6 months, you can easily gain a lot of muscle mass. Yeah. But easily start plateauing.
Results as a whole. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, and then exactly. And then what happens is after year 2, year 3, whatever, you just start like, it's very minimal. You just start plateauing. Have you dealt with that, and how do you manage that?
Progressive overload plays a factor, right? So adding the right stimulus that you need for you to continue to keep seeing results, right? The vast majority aren't at that point that they've hit a plateau. All they'll have to do is change up very small amounts, say change up the rep scheme, change up the sets, change up the volume, right? They won't have to change a lot. It's usually the ones who are like really, really high, right? And for them, it's like the smallest percentage, right? That makes a huge difference, right? So for them, it's like, adding 2.5 pounds, it's like the hardest thing to do, right? But that's on the other end of the spectrum. For the most people, it's just, you can honestly, so every month, change up the sets how many sets, so basically volume that you're adding in. You can change up the reps that you're doing, right? And do that for a certain period of time, and then go back to that, and you'll start to see a change. It's not overly complicated for the average person. If you're talking about athletes and stuff, it's very different. It's a lot more detailed, and you've got to go through a whole different process to be able to see the results, but they're playing within the percentages. They're playing within small percentages, like 1-2%, right? But the majority of people, it's just, don't overthink it, right? If you've been doing, say, 5x5, okay, then increase the reps, decrease the sets if you want, add a little bit more resistance to it. So go from 8 to 12 reps, for example, right? And do like 3 to 4 sets, right? Mm-hmm. It's a different stimulus that you're adding, right? Do that for a little while, right? And then come back to that and see the difference, right? Because you've already have the strength. Now you're just going to add a different variable and kind of just keep overloading over time, and you'll start to see the difference.
One more thing I wanted to ask you was testosterone. A lot of people are low on testosterone. They don't really know it. Is that something you look at in terms of blood test results and then see if...
No, because so these days testosterone's it's being blown out of proportion. Mind you, it doesn't help that people are super unhealthy. They don't eat well, mm-hmm. right? But you're seeing guys in their 30s and 40s complaining about stuff, even though they don't have. They're turning to all these random supplements, and then you have certain people who are popular on social media talking about, oh, you gotta take this supplement to increase your... The vast majority of people don't have a testosterone issue. They have an issue of just being consistently eating healthier. They have an issue with consistently being physically active. And then on top of that, they're kind of creating this negativity in their own head, right? And that's one of the biggest issues, right? Is that they're actually just kind of having this subconscious, like kind of like, defeating themselves as well, right? That plays a huge factor to it too. And people are just kind of neglecting that as well, right? It's like men, when it comes to certain performances at certain times, right? When they can't perform, a lot of times it's a mental thing. The vast majority of the time it's a mental thing, mm-hmm. right? So when you speak to those who are experts in the field, they'll be like, yeah, it's if you speak to a therapist or anyone, they'll be like, it's a mental thing, right? I don't think, so yes, if people eat healthier overall, right? Increasing your vegetables, having sufficient protein, not overdoing it on the carbohydrates and fat, and making sure that you're being physically active. Like working out increases your testosterone.
Yes,
right.
That's right.
Being physically active has a huge impact on it, right? It has so increasing those things will naturally improve overall. But people have gotten so fixated because, again, they want to try to find a way to optimize every little number that they can come up with, mm-hmm. right? And it's unfortunate because then you're seeing people kind of go down this route where they're turning to all these random supplements, and the only way to increase your testosterone realistically, besides that stuff, like if you really want to give it a huge jump, is testosterone.
Of course, right? Yeah, TRT.
That's it. Any else is not going to change much at all. It's going to be so insignificant, right? Like I have guys that I know, and they're taking all these random supplements, and I'm like, what are you guys doing? I'm like, you guys are fine. Trust me, I'm telling you, you're fine. I'm like, I've worked out with you guys. I've played sports with you guys. I'm like, all right. I'm like, it's not giving you anything in return.
People want to go from like 600 to like 900,000.
And and the thing is, it's like, why? What are you looking to achieve?
Put on muscle mass faster. There's also bedroom things that people want to improve or whatever.
And a lot of times, unfortunately, we have this over sexualization of society as well.
That's right.
Right. Yeah. So when people are talking about a lot of these issues that are going on, say in the bedroom and so forth, what are you watching on your phone? Right. Because that has destroyed and warped so many people's minds. Right. Especially youth now, like it's so accessible. That is absolutely destroyed and just warped so many people's minds, because in a sense where, the expectation and it just what it does to your brain as a whole, the destructiveness that it causes in your relationships and everything as a whole, right? Like, and so you can't compare it to that. Right? Yeah. First off, they're experts for a reason, right? Like right? It's like watching on Instagram someone bench press who's been bench pressing, who's like a world record holder in bench press, and thinking I'm going to sit there comparing to a guy who's benching like 700 pounds. So that you're not going to achieve that.
Makes sense,
right?
Yeah.
So, but that's the biggest thing, right? And so when you hear guys talk about like these male enhancement and all this stuff, like why? You have to ask yourself and sit down and be like, wait, why are you doing that?
That's right.
Yeah. Instead of turning to a thing, find someone that you can speak to. Right, so find someone who's an expert in understanding how to be able to go through that, right? And understand that why are you turning to these things, right? And maybe you do need it, but make sure you exhaust every avenue before you go down that route.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Because there's other complications that can come along with it, right? I'm really big on trying to stay as natural as possible, because I'm like, there's all the supplements that you can take that are clean and natural as possible. There's all the nutrients and vitamins and food and workouts and everything that you can do that's as natural as possible. And then there's people that you can speak to from a mental health aspect of it to really, really work on that. There's so many different things that you can do to really exhaust everything first. And then, all right, maybe yes, no problem. But you have to honestly say that you've done everything in your power to be able to justify going down that route.
Makes sense. So, in conclusion, you have a coaching program, and your wife as well as a nutrition expert. So, where can people find you? Where can people find your program?
So for me, it's Stronger with Belal. I spell Belal B-E, not B-I, because I spelled it properly.
That's right.
Always hearing the other way around my life. So finally have to say that to all the Belals out there. And my wife, Nutrition by Naz. On Instagram or TikTok, whatever. I'm not much on TikTok yet, but on Instagram or Facebook, and then thehealthymuslims.com online. You can find us. And the big thing for us is always getting people to understand that you don't have to give up your culture to be healthy. Finding ways to just enjoy life, and then also being an example for your kids and others around you. If we really want to start creating change in the community and so forth, taking care of your health will be a huge part of it, because it'll give us energy, it'll give us focus, it'll help us with our personal lives and so forth, and that'll start to have a huge impact overall. A lot of men that have come talk to me, they're like, I'm having issues with that side of things. And they start eating healthier, start working out, and they'll come back to me with a few months and they'll be like, bro, this changed. And I'm like, alhamdulillah, because they start to see the difference, right? Like, you can't just sit around and expect yourself to just be at an optimal level, right? So you got to get active, you got to start moving, you got to get healthier, right? And then vice versa for the for women as well, right? Like, especially for husband and wife, this is all you got. You don't got anyone else. So take care of yourself for each other. Do it for each other. Do it with a sense of love, right? Because all you got is each other. So do it for each other as well, right? Because be in shape for each other, not for anyone else. Do it for each other at least, right? Because at least that way hey, I'm here, for my spouse, right? And I want to make sure that they don't have anywhere else to look.
Awesome, Belal. It's been great talking with you, and a lot of great lessons. So inshallah, we'd love to have you again.
Definitely, brother. It was good seeing you as well.
Thanks so much.
That's been it. If you haven't already, please subscribe and share this episode, and we'll catch you on the next one.